So now what we can do is we can jump into the style.css page, and I'm just going to kind of go down through top to bottom, and I'm going to add a bunch of styles to the different elements as I go, just adding in some spacing using box model, and also some widths and heights of things, and also some box aesthetics. And then later on we'll move on to using floating properties to position elements and create column structure. So we can just go to the top of the style.css page here. And the first one I'm going to do is I'm actually going to select the body itself. So the body is actually an element, and remember the body is the entire viewable area of the page. And let's go ahead and add a box aesthetic property here, which is called background. So background is the way that we can specify an image and the image's positioning and whether it repeats or not, etc. So in order to specify a background image, we can say URL, and then in parentheses we can point toward the location of the image. So I'm going to go ahead and say .. to leave the CSS folder, and then images/ to go into the images folder. And I'm going to use an image called handmade paper .png. And by default, if you don't specify any positioning or any repeating of the image, by default it will be positioned in the top left corner of the body and it will repeat infinitely. Because I don't specify any repeating commands values here, it's just going to repeat horizontally and vertically as far as the browser window can go. So let's go ahead and save that and come back and let's hit refresh. And that was pretty subtle. I don't know if you guys can tell, but everything was white before, and now it actually has kind of a texture of paper. If we zoom in here, maybe you can see it a little bit better there. This sort of a handmade paper texture. So it's an off-white. We've just given our white page a subtle texture of off-white. If you want to go ahead and check out what that image looks like on its own, we can bring that up here in the Finder. And you can see that's called handmade paper. So a square of this is only this big. It's actually only 100 by 100 pixels, but it's actually repeating infinitely. However wide our screen is, however tall and wide the browser window is, it's just going to repeat this texture. And it looks like one seamless texture then. We're also going to change some spacing on things like the H2s and H3s. And remember, if I use a comma, I can specify a compound selector where it will style both the H2 and the H3 the same. And we're going to add some margin, some bottom margin here, which is, remember, margin is the spacing outside of elements. So if I want to add a little bit of spacing below the H2 and H3, I can set that here. In our case, the spacing below the H2 and H3 is a little more than I want. This is the default that it's getting from the normalize.css that we've also linked to. And this looks like it's about 20-25 pixels apart. I'd like it to actually be closer to the paragraphs. So I'm going to set that to 5 pixels of margin. Okay. And if we go ahead and save that and come back and refresh, we can see that we changed the spacing there. Aside from our headings here, we also want to change the margin below our lists. So we have ordered and unordered lists, and if we'd like to change the margin below there, we can set it to margin-bottom, and we'll say 10 pixels. And the list items themselves, we want them to indent a little bit. So we'll go ahead and set the margin-left to about 20 pixels, like that. And we'll save, and we'll come back to the browser and refresh. Now to see these list items are actually on the catalog page. And if I scroll down here to where we have shoe archive, you'll see them indented here, 20 pixels. And also here you'll see the 1, 2, 3. This should be now indented 20 pixels here. Okay, that's good. Okay, so our paragraphs and address bar, we also have some font size here. We'll also go ahead and add some margin inside of here. So just in the same way that we can say margin dash top, margin dash bottom, margin dash left, we can also use shorthand. And remember, the number of values that you place here will determine which side is affected or which side is being spaced. So here we can say, for example, if we want to set the top to 0 and both sides to 0, but we want to set the bottom to 25 pixels, this would be another way to write this. So instead of saying margin dash bottom, we can also say margin, which is shorthand, and say 0 on the top, 0 on the left and right, and 25 pixels on the bottom, like that. So when there's 3 values, first value is top, second value is both sides, and third value is bottom. Okay. And we'll also go ahead and add some spacing. We'll use the same technique to add some spacing below the figures. So remember, we have an HTML5 semantic element called figure that exists surrounding all of our images here. And also the figure is surrounding also our video here in the artist corner section. So we'll go ahead and say figure, and we'll add a margin here of 0 space 0 space 10 pixels. Just 10 pixels on the bottom and no margin on the top and sides.